Hi guys, this is Max with Family Piano Co. and I am here today with our piano technician Tim, and we're going to be talking about old growth wood versus fast growth wood and different wood qualities on different pianos and generally how that impacts the sound and a couple of things to keep in mind because wood quality actually has changed quite a bit over the years and there's quite a lot of interesting things to know about how that impacts your piano.
All right, to get started here, to answer the question, what is old growth wood and why does it matter?
So, what is old growth wood? What it is literally what it sounds like. It was an old tree. That's all it is. But what you're really looking for that gives it the quality, the sound quality, and why old growth is usually it's preferable to newer materials because you have the rings of the tree, and that's how we tell the age. The tighter the rings are packed, the more it's going to hold that sound quality. Your sustain of the sound is going to be better, and it's just going to keep vibrating inside that wood. So that's old growth in a nutshell.
And so what difference does that make, having old growth wood in an instrument?
Having old growth wood in an instrument usually gives it a warmer tone. Like I said earlier, you're going to have more, the vibration of the tone is going to carry inside the wood better. The weight is going to be a lot different. I actually come from the guitar world, as you can tell. You can hold a brand new Les Paul Standard and a 1958 Les Paul Standard, identical guitars by all aspects, but that 1958 is going to be 10 pounds heavier. Not really, but really, it feels like it sometimes. But that's because of the wood that they were using. It's old growth wood, it's more densely packed, and those are the more desirable instruments out there on the market right now, is those older instruments that have that. Newer stuff, it doesn't have the same qualities. Newer stuff tends to be a lot brighter. You tend to lose a lot of the sustain in the newer stuff. So that's the main difference.
So we used to have a lot of old growth wood. We don't have too much of it anymore. Kind of around what time period are we looking at which we kind of lost a lot of that old growth wood and newer instruments began being made with more of that fast growth wood?
That all kind of went downhill in the 1970s. 1970, end of the 60s into the 70s is when all of the manufacturers really started running out of their really good cuts that used to make everything that they made. Once they started getting lower and lower supplies of those cuts, then they started doing things like, well, we're going to use the old growth for the soundboard, but new stuff we're going to use for the rest of the construction. And they also started coming up with more, layered and laminated rims and design features like that to supplement not having the same quality materials.
Awesome. We're gonna head over to another piano with a good example of old growth wood. Here we have just about 100 years old. This is a Mason and Hamlin Model A. Now these are one of the most popular models of grand piano, American built, really for a very long time. I mean, they're still making this model today, but at about 100 years old, this guy is going to be using more of that old growth wood. And you can really see, it's a little hard to see sometimes with the lighting in this store, but the grains of the wood very close together. And it's just going to give it a very natural kind of tone. I like to say it has this like woody, warm, natural character to the sound. And really on a well-maintained older instrument, you're just going to get a uniqueness of character in that sound that's going to, it's going to be drastically different from a new instrument. New pianos can still be fantastic and they're going to sound fantastic. It's just a very different kind of sound, and you don't quite get the same kind of sound that you do on these older, very well built grand pianos. we have another Mason and Hamlin Model A, so still the same quality of piano in terms of, you know, really well American built piano, very high tier instrument. This one is 1979, and we kind of mentioned that around the 1970s, that's kind of when a lot of the really good quality, very old growth, meaning like 500-ish year old trees, a lot of them were starting to be just gone by the 70s, but there still was a lot of good quality wood out there. So how do you think something like this would compare, you know, to an older instrument, and then also compared to like a brand new instrument?
Compared to an older instrument, I would say that they would be more or less the same. Compared to a brand new instrument right out of the box, I would say that this is going to be a better quality. You obviously have the modern materials with, you know, modern finishing, so they can hold up for longer. But this is just straight natural. The wood is doing its thing. So I would think that my opinion would be that the 1979 is better sound quality, material quality wise than the modern one.
And so here we have our Kawai GL-10 entry-level Grand. You know, entry-level meaning that this is the smallest size that Kawai makes, and it's going to be at their lowest price point. So we're going to kind of talk about the quality of wood that you can find on an instrument like this.
So if we just look through at the soundboard here, this is a newer cut, but this is still a nice cut. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a new cut. It's just if you have a cut that's an old growth tree, you're going to have those tighter rings like we talked about before, and that's going to add a lot to your sound quality.
Sure. So, you know, again, really there's nothing wrong with the fast growth wood. Is it going to be better than old growth wood? No. Unfortunately, that's just you know, one of these non-renewable, you know, natural beauties of the earth that, you know, over time we kind of lost because we cut down most of our trees. We're regrowing them though, which is a great thing, but you know, that kind of wood quality really takes hundreds of years to really develop.
There are entire farmed forests nowadays where they're just making material for instruments, and that's never going to be the same as cutting down a tree that was growing in the forest for hundreds of years.
Absolutely. So the sound quality that we get out of this guy, I mean, it's just a very nice quality new grand piano. The sound is just going to be a lot more modern. Of course, there's a lot of other factors that go into this than just the wood. So we're really talking about, you know, wood quality, but you know, it would be careless not to mention the other differences going on, like a brand new fresh set of strings, brand new hammer felts. The sound overall is going to be very modern, as well as another big difference is the other grands we were looking at were, you know, older American grands. This one, the GL-10 is actually going to be built in Indonesia, but it's just going to be a much more modern sound design. Part of this goes into like sound profiles have kind of changed over time of like what the customers, what musicians prefer in terms of their sounds. This is a much more modern sounding piano, and a lot of that does go into the wood quality. You know, if this was made with old growth wood, it would sound markedly different. But I just want to point out that definitely in this comparison, there's much more going on than just the wood. But the wood quality is going to play a really big role, and it's part of a pretty big part of the reason why new pianos are going to just sound very different than older pianos. So usually the soundboard of the piano is going to be made out of spruce wood. But there's actually different kinds of wood being used throughout the piano. So let's kind of talk about generally what kinds of wood are going to be found in the action of a piano.
So a lot of your action components are going to be made out of pine or sugar maple or a combination of both, because they're both relatively light materials. Hammer cores get a little bit different from brand to brand. They can be the same material as the rest of the action, but some brands go for a harder wood like a mahogany or a walnut, you know, something that's really got some striking force to it, and that gives you just more of that thump of a sound.
Some parts of the action, are very important for sound production. And there are some parts that, don't contribute so much to the sound, but have more mechanical functions. We kind of talk about that.
Yeah. So as you can see here, this is the cross section of a Kawai action. Kawai uses carbon fiber parts instead of the wooden parts on this action over here. Now what that does is they just wanted to be ahead of the times with technology. That doesn't affect the sound quality at all. It doesn't affect the sound quality at all because these are wood. It doesn't make a difference either way. What they did leave wooden was just their hammer shanks and their hammer heads. But everything else, they stripped it for the sake of being modern. And
there's a lot of advantages of, because wood is a great material for sound production purposes. But in general, if you're just talking about parts that serve only a mechanical function, wood is not always the best material. I mean, it's a compressive material. So, when you press on it, there's some kinetic energy that gets lost just due to compression. So by replacing certain parts in an action, with a material that doesn't react to humidity changes, it doesn't react to temperature changes, and it's really good at, funneling energy through it without, losing energy, with much less lost energy. So a greater energy efficient design, it can make sense. A big reason that a lot of companies still stick to fully wooden actions, a lot of it comes down to tradition. And generally, wooden actions can be very, very good. It's just that some of those parts that only have mechanical functions, it doesn't always make the most sense to make them out of wood. It can work, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the absolute best material for the job.
Certainly not in our modern times. And I've worked on 100-year-old pianos like our Hamilton here, where you turn the capstan and it snaps because the wood is 1,000,000 years old and it's all dried out and it's reached the end of its life. But that's not going to happen with your carbon fiber parts.
So to kind of introduce here, we have our Kawai GX-6, and this is going to be kind of the tippy top of Kawai's pianos. Of course, you have the Shigeru Kawais, but generally in terms of design, those are going to be pretty similar to the GX line. So kind of at the height of quality for a new piano, what kind of wood are you getting in the soundboard?
So Kawai soundboards are all solid spruce. This is an older cut because your lines are nicely packed together, if we can see this.
It kind of picks up.
Yeah. This is an older cut. So I would think that, on the higher quality pianos, just like with a lot of different instrument makers, you're going to use those older pieces, higher quality pieces on your nicer things, obviously. But
so would this qualify as old growth wood then?
I would say yes.
But would you say probably not as old, long growing as like a 100-year-old instrument?
Absolutely. Because there are modern forests that are specifically grown for these types of applications. Entire forests of farmed spruce. So you can still get a good quality cut from those trees, but it's not the same as cutting down a spruce that had been growing in a forest for hundreds of years. Another thought that I just had differences between old and new is the newer stuff tends to be a lot knottier because it's being grown out in the open. It's not growing in a forest in its natural environment. The natural environment is what really gives it that extra whatever it is, you know, that extra that you want. The newer stuff that grows faster out in the open, it's not tightly packed with its other trees, it's not competing for the sunlight, tends to be knottier, has more sticks in it, and that is something that can affect your sound quality, is having those knots of wood. So that's a bad thing.
We looked at quite a few different pianos today. We talked about wood quality on newer pianos, on more entry-level new pianos, or more like this guy where it's, you know, your high-tier new piano, difference in wood quality. Then we looked at, you know, older instruments around 100 years old. But to kind of conclude, if you are considering buying a piano, you know, and you're probably reading a lot of information online, you know, there's a lot of marketing kind of buzz terms out there, and of course every new piano is going to talk up their wood quality, but in general, if you're choosing between like a nice used, you know, piano, an older piano versus like something new, you know, kind of what differences are you going to be looking at in terms of the wood?
In terms of the wood, that's kind of difficult because as you can just glance around our showroom, like, you're not going to be able to tell most of the time, like, what is really going on with the outside construction. So really just, I would look over the soundboard, I would play all of them, and I would really just go off of the sound, not try and worry about wood so much. If we were buying a smaller instrument, such as a violin or a guitar, I might look more into the real materials that were used for the different components.
So essentially there's a lot of different factors at play in a piano. In terms of like guitars or violins, just a greater proportion of it's made out of, you know, wood. It's made out of generally one kind of wood. You know, there's less that impacts the sound on those instruments besides for the wood quality. I mean, of course, you have string quality, things like that. But on a piano, there's a lot of other elements at play. So while wood quality certainly, you know, is something that can inform, you know, your decision, it's not really a make or break kind of thing. Like, trust your eyes, trust your ears, trust your fingers.
Especially your ears.
Absolutely.
You are the musician. You need to love your instrument.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of factors to consider when buying a piano. I mean, wood quality, it's definitely, you know, a good thing to know about. It's definitely a good thing to understand that, you know, on these older pianos, that is a big plus. That is a big plus of you know, looking at, you know, an older instrument, especially a nice restored piano means you get, you know, the quality older wood, but you get most of the action parts replaced, so it's functionally a lot newer. But in general, you can still get good wood quality. It's not as good as it used to be, but you can still find a lot of really good quality wood out there. So thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I'm Max with Family Piano Co. If you have any other questions about pianos, about Kawai pianos, or, you know, just used pianos in general, how to consider, you know, different types of instruments, please go ahead and send me an email, max@familypiano.com. I'm more than happy to help. And please like and subscribe to these videos. We want to put out more content just talking about pianos and kind of educating people. I like to say pianos are probably one of the most misunderstood instruments by the majority of consumers buying them. There's a lot to learn. I've worked at a piano store for going on 4 years now, and before that, I had a piano performance degree, so I spent 4 years in college studying the piano. Really, I've spent my entire life studying pianos, but I knew very little about the instruments themselves until I actually started working here in a piano store. So there's a lot to learn. So if you like to keep learning about pianos, please like and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.